So I'll invite firstly Jessica Strutt to come and deliver her piece, followed by Peter, and then we'll go into conversation.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon. The magic and madness that is an election campaign. Friends become foes and foes become friends. I've been asked to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the campaign trail, particularly the personalities. Now, before I start, I'm just a humble ABC reporter, so nothing expressed here today is my opinion. It is merely observations from the campaign. Much has been said about the impact of the minor parties, especially One Nation, that they're expected to have on the election outcome on March 11. Some polls are predicting that One Nation may actually secure as much as 13% of the primary vote. Now, many of you here might be scratching your head and find that hard to believe. You may not even know anyone that's planning to vote One Nation. I too was sceptical of their level of support, but like any good journalist, over the past few months, I've been straw polling many taxi and Uber drivers about their voting intentions. Almost all, many immigrants themselves, have told me they plan to vote for One Nation. And when I ask them why, they cite the Trump factor. Rightly or wrongly, they see Pauline Hanson as a person who cares about them, but more importantly, who cares about what concerns them. They don't care that One Nation may not have many policies, they're just dissatisfied with the status quo. They're disaffected with the two major parties and believe they are completely out of touch. In essence, my sophisticated straw poll has indicated that One Nation may in fact do better than the polls are indicating on March 11. During this campaign, I've interviewed Pauline Hanson twice as part of a media press pack. In both interviews, she teared up. That's pretty rare for a politician. Many journalists who may not understand her appeal with voters have commented after interviewing her that she has a certain warmth and charisma. They may not understand or agree with her politics or views, but it's clear when you interview her that there is an apparent warmth and a certain level of authenticity, and that translates on camera. She may not talk in intellectual academic terms. She doesn't need to. Her appeal to voters is that she appears to come across as someone who is genuine, and she certainly gives the impression that she listens, she cares about the average person, the battler, those sick of political correctness, and most importantly, those who are over the two major parties. Now on to the two leaders. Mark McGowan jumped out of the blocks early with his campaign, cleverly, while Colin Barnett was on leave. The Liberals appeared to be completely caught off guard. Long campaigns generally favour oppositions, so it was a smart move by WA Labor. Mark McGowan's campaign started with a whistle-stop blitz of all 59 lower house seats. This had everything to do with projecting an image of an energetic alternative to Colin Barnett. And it's a theme he's continued throughout the campaign, as he reminds us that he's a stark contrast to a tired, old, out-of-touch government. He also wears his average suburban guy mantra as a badge of honour. I don't think I've been to a press conference where Mark McGowan hasn't reminded me that he lives in Rockingham with his family and he understands the concerns of the average family. As the Premier visited the Governor to request that the writs be issued, Mark McGowan's wife Sarah was on a train heading up from Rockingham. With the journos invited along to capture every moment as he met her on a platform at the train station in Perth, the two then jumped on a cat bus together and headed up to Parliament. There she stood side by side as he made his pitch to voters as the official campaign kicked off. During the campaign, the average in-touch guy pitch has continued, and he even invited the cameras as he dropped his daughter off to her first day of school. That is very unusual for a politician. This week, on Valentine's Day, he tweeted a love message to his wife Sarah, complete with a picture of them kissing. In contrast, Colin Barnett has appeared to be very much the Premier who's been in the job more than 8 long years. He's campaigned often alongside his charismatic deputy, Lisa Harvey. They're very much running on a joint leadership ticket. The WA Liberals press releases carry both of their pitches. They held a joint press conference to make their pitch as the official campaign got underway. He traded on his experience, his government's record. Barnett the statesman, a safe pair of hands, who secures the big international deals. He left his deputy to woo the voters living in the burbs. She's a young mum. She gets how tough some families are doing it at the moment. She's tough on crime, but mostly her focus is on combating meth and the big bad crims that unleash untold misery on families by peddling it to them. For much of the campaign, the Premier has appeared to be a little on edge and aloof, and at times quite dismissive of journalists who ask genuine questions. Certainly over the past 2 weeks, the Labor leader, Mark McGowan, has appeared to grow in stature. He's less nervy. He appears to have started seeing himself as an alternative Premier. Colin Barnett has appeared to exude the same confidence, statesman-like demeanour and call-it-like he sees it manner that we all know he's renowned for. But at times, he's let his snippy side get the better of him at media events, and that translates on camera. The personalities of these two men and their pitch to voters is, for once, as wide a gulf as some of the policies they are pitching. One is ploughing on with clearing 96 hectares of bushland for Row 8. The other is promising to tear up the project's contract. One is promising to sell 51% of Western Power. The other is getting union support to oppose it. One's party has done a deal with One Nation on preferences. The other leader finally ruled out any such courtship. But enough from me. We can discuss some more of this during the panel, and thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, David, and thanks to CEDA for the invitation to speak to you this afternoon. I was crossing off items in my talk as Jessica went on, but there are still a few things left to say. But can I just say, first of all, following Nev Power's speech, if I was Mark McGowan or Colin Barnett, the first thing I'd do would be to appoint Nev Power as Western Australia's Ambassador at Large. I think it was a most heartening address and full of confidence for the future. And I think that's the way we should see it, despite some of the dismal things that we are hearing during the campaign. For instance, you might have seen this morning that new unemployment figures were out, and Western Australia's rate was 6.5. Now, there's going to be a fight over that. The national average is 5.7. 6.5 is down from 6.9. So, in one sense, it's a better result. On another sense, when you look at the sort of participation rates and those sorts of things that people like Rick looks at, that you might find a different story. But that'll be a fight over the issue of unemployment. Look, the thing about this campaign that strikes me, and I've seen a few, the thing about this campaign is the disconnect between a lot of the voters and the major parties. And it's a bigger disconnect than I've seen for a long time. And Jessica made reference to One Nation and the support that One Nation has been able to sort of build up. The party polled 55,000 votes in the Senate in July in Western Australia without even really trying. In 2001, they polled something like more than 100,000 in the Legislative Council here in the West. So they've done it before, 55,000 without really trying in July, and they're trying very hard now, and I would expect that their first preference vote in the upper house on March the 11th will be well over 100,000. And that might translate into 3, 4 or 5 members. Time will tell. But and the support for the major parties, looking at the polling, is down around 70% of the overall vote, which means the other 30% is divided among all the other parties. There are 16 registered parties, by the way, for the election in March, compared to 7 last time round. So no wonder they're doing little deals about how to work out the preferences and the micro parties and that sort of thing. Not sure how it's going to work out. I don't think anyone knows how it's going to work out. But it could be a very, very divided upper house that returns after this election, the upper house when it takes its new complexion in May. So, look, I mentioned the disconnect as a big feature of the campaign, and when Pauline Hanson introduced her candidates a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was astonishing that so many people were prepared to put their hand up and have a go for public office. Some of them will be a lot out of pocket too, by the way, but it's such as the sort of, I guess, the sort of questioning of a lot of people about major parties, whether they represent their best interests, and who's going to look after them now that the job security is a bit tenuous. People's earning power less than it was, particularly if you're in the FIFO in the resources sector. Earning power a lot less than it was, and we heard about the economy in transition. Certainly it is in transition. It's a period of uncertainty, and they're not quite confident that the major parties have the answers. That's why they're sort of looking around for other alternatives. That's why One Nation will probably poll so well, but the other smaller parties will probably do quite well as well. So in addition, so there's uncertainty. There's the failure of the major parties to acknowledge this uncertainty and to come to terms with it. And can I just give you an example? Federal Parliament resumed this week. What's everyone hoping for? Economic leadership. How are we going to sort out the economy? You know, can the parties come together? Can Malcolm Turnbull and Bill Shorten, can they come together and come up with a strategy? And what do we hear about this week when Parliament resumes? Cory Bernardi resigns from the Liberal Party. That seems to be the big story. And they're talking about same-sex marriage again. And I think that's why One Nation is building on strength, because the people, middle and lower income earners, they're not interested in those sorts of things. They're interested in their job security. Will they have a job next week? What about the job security for their children? They're the sort of things that they're interested in, first and foremost. And then these other things might come in a bit later. And the major parties haven't acknowledged that. And that's why they're struggling to earn these support from these groups. That's the challenge for the major parties. So the issues, obviously the economy is a big issue, and we heard about growth rates. The growth rate in the pre-election financial statement from the Treasury last week for Western Australia was cut this financial year from 1% to 0.5%. So in other words, we're just staggering along. When you take out the resource sector with the NEV and the resource sector is the iron ore sort of powering along, the rest of the economy growing at just 0.5. And you say, yes, look, I see that because I see the vacant shops around the town and a lot of the small business is doing it hard. So just the point of view about the economy, that's a very big issue. I mentioned the One Nation factor, and can I just mention time is running out. I mean, it's 23 days, David said, 23 days to go. Time is running out. The major parties were doing their campaign launches this Sunday morning at the same time. First time ever that's ever happened. Why are they doing that? Because voting starts on Monday. Early polling starts on Monday. Time is running out. My time's run out too. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter, and a very nice segue at the end to wrap up. The consummate broadcast professional is still with you. I'd like to start with you, Peter, and I think before we look forward, I think it'd be worth looking back for a brief moment. And are there similarities, do you think, between this election campaign and that of 2001, which saw Richard Court lose to Jeff Gallop?
There certainly are similarities. Richard Court government had served 2 terms. Colin Barnett's government has served 2 terms, going for a record 3rd 4-year term. No one else has ever done it, so he's going for a record 3rd 4-year term. There's the it's time factor, which always comes into play the longer you're there. And in addition, there's the One Nation factor. And in 2001, you might remember, One Nation was had a very high profile in the state election. A lot of pressure on the Liberals and Labor with regard to One Nation and its attitude towards Asian migration, which was considered by many to be offensive. And the Liberals decided to put One Nation last on their how to vote card. Richard Court said he couldn't live with himself if he didn't do that. And as a result of that, One Nation put the sitting parties or the sitting members last on most of their how to vote cards, and of course the Liberals had more sitting members and the Liberals paid the costs. So it put them out of government. And I think Colin Barnett had that in his mind, or the Liberal Party had that in their mind with the preference deal the other day.
Jess, you're on the road every day with the leaders out on the hustings. We've had discussion today about debt, deficit, the economy, jobs. Is that the hot button issue out on the streets for this campaign?
Well, certainly both the parties, both the leaders have been talking up jobs a lot, but I don't know how tuned in people are yet to the campaign. I'm not getting any sense that the public are really tuned in, but certainly on the campaign, jobs is a huge issue, probably particularly for the Labor leader, Mark McGowan, obviously talking up more local production, his MetroNet rail project. So certainly they're trying to get that onto the agenda, but I think in terms of the media coverage so far, it really has been dominated in a sense by the antics of some One Nation candidates and also the preference deal that's been done. So I think I got a bit of a sense yesterday that perhaps the focus of the campaign is shifting more to the economy, the state of the finances. I think early on the only thing that we sort of had talked about in terms of economic figures was Lisa Harvey, the Deputy Premier's inability to remember the key ones like debt, deficit and unemployment. So unfortunately that had been the only sort of focus of that. But I think now, yesterday we saw obviously the announcement about payroll tax from the Liberals. Clearly the Liberals are trying to wedge Labor over whether they're going to introduce any new taxes. So, and both sides have foreshadowed further announcements around how they plan to fix the economy. So I think it'll become a much more of a hot button issue.
Both of you spoke about disillusionment of voters with the major parties and the political process. Jess, you said the voters haven't switched on yet. At what point, to both of you, do you think the public will actually start to take an interest in how they vote on March 11?
Well, generally speaking, I find, having covered previous election campaigns, it's usually in the final week or the final few days. So I don't suspect that will change. I mean, I'm pretty sure most people in this room would be tuned in because of who's in here. But
they're all smart people.
The average person, you can say that then, yeah, you take that. The average people out in the suburbs aren't really tuned in, and I think that does come across when you talk to people outside. I mean, obviously I'm across it every day, so I find even with family and friends sometimes they're not tuned in. So I think generally speaking people tune in more the week of the last week of that campaign. And I think one of the problems we've had this time around is we've had an extraordinarily long campaign. Maybe not officially, but you know, obviously Mark McGowan, as I said, he jumped out of the blocks early, and what it meant is we almost had an extra 3 or 4 weeks of campaigning. So a lot of people actually switch off when that happens, and they may re-engage towards the end. So that would be my gut feeling.
I think with the launch of the Liberal and Labor campaigns on Sunday morning, it'll be on. It'll be on for young and old, and voting starts on Monday. I mean, if you want to go in and vote early, you can do it from Monday, and you don't have to give a reason. Like the federal area where you've got to say you might be away from Perth or whatever. This time round, you don't have to give a reason. Just go in and vote early. And that's why I think the major parties, hundreds of thousands of people will vote before March the 11th. And the parties would be very wise to make sure that everyone's galvanised. And that's why I think it'll really pick up from Sunday.
Based on the rough numbers, Labor needs, 10 seats and a 10% swing, rough numbers. To both of you, and we'll keep this brief because there's a lot of seats that could be in play, what are some of the seats that you'll be watching very, very closely on election night? And do you expect any sort of surprises?
Well, clearly, the seats that I'll be watching closely on election night are the seats that the parties are watching closely, which is the ones in the northern suburbs who spent half the election campaign out there. Wanneroo, Burns Beach. I think Bicton will be interesting. Labor are hoping to pick up that new seat of Bicton. That's a tough battle there with the Roll 8 project. And I think there's also some sleeper seats out there in the eastern suburbs. Swan Hills would be one that I would like to watch. The seat of Perth will be pretty fascinating as well, to see if the Labor Party can win that one back. So they're probably the key ones, but there's plenty of them, so I'm sure you can list another 10 probably.
Well, I think that the 6 tightest seats will pretty much go to Labor straight up. That the Labor will pick up the 6 tightest seats up to a swing of about 5 or 6%. But seats that will really be fascinating, I think, on election night will be Pilbara, where Brendan Grills will be fighting to hang on to his political future against a $2 million campaign against him by the mining industry. It's an extraordinary result. I've never seen anything like that. And the seat of Bunbury. What's the seat of Bunbury? It's a 12.2% safe seat for the Liberal Party, but it's going to be very tight in Bunbury. Collie Preston's another one, which is going to be tight. So Jess mentioned the city seats, but there are going to be some really good tussles in the country as well.
Peter, you spoke a lot about the one nation factor. And there's been a lot of media coverage around this preference deal that Liberals have done. Is that a game changer, and can it keep Colin Barnett and the Liberals in power?
It's potentially, David, it's potentially a game changer. It just depends how disciplined that One Nation party vote is. I suspect it won't be highly disciplined, because the One Nation people seem to me to be very sort of rugged individuals, and they're not into that sort of party structure, and we've seen a few examples of that. But it doesn't seem to have upset their support, by the way. I'm not sure it'll upset their support. But I think it's the One Nation factor, and how good that preference deal is with the Liberal Party, which might just get the Liberal Party home in some tight seats. It could make the difference, but you know, it's a very loose. Look, anything could happen. Anything could happen as a result of that. Look, the Liberals took out some insurance, but you know, it's one of those insurance policies that might backfire.
Jess, your thoughts on, is it a game changer?
Yeah, I think maybe, you're right, PK. I think the fine print might have been worthwhile having a bit more of a read. Look, I don't think it's a huge game changer. I think it will definitely help One Nation's prospects in the upper house. In terms of in the lower house, I think perhaps, the help that it will provide the Liberals might have been overstated, would be my take on it. But as Peter said, it remains to be seen. So, and I totally agree with Peter that the stuff that's come out about One Nation's candidates over the past few days, and I assume some other stories will continue as the campaign continues, won't put a dent at all in One Nation's support at all with their supporters, I wouldn't think. Probably even help them.
We've spent a little bit of time talking about the politics and the cut and thrust of all this, but there are some significant policy differences in this campaign, and I can't recall a campaign where there've been such stark differences on some of those major issues. Do the voters really have a choice this time round? Do you think those policy issues, and we're talking about deregulate, sale of assets and debt repayments and all of those things, is that going to resonate with the public, or are they going to focus more on the level of unhappiness and grumpiness they have?
My view is the latter. I think the state's finances and the unemployment figure we've just heard, the latest today, means people will be very much voting with their hip pocket. And I think Colin Barnett, even himself yesterday at a Chamber of Commerce and Industry breakfast, acknowledged that his biggest challenge is the time factor. 8.5 long years in government's tough. We have, as PK already said, 4-year terms. And I just think it'll be very, very difficult. I think people will be going in there thinking about, should I just give the other bloke a go? That's actually what I think will be a major factor, the time factor. No, I don't think people, generally speaking, out in the suburbs are really going to be thinking about roll 8 or no roll 8, Western Power sale or no Western Power sale, sadly.
One factor, David, is in addition to the Labor campaign, the union movement's been running a campaign. I mean, I know the Chambers of Minerals and Energy has been running a campaign too. But the unions have been running a campaign, very much bread and butter issues, and very much on Western Power and, it returns a profit of $400 million a year, why would you sell it, sort of thing. So, I mean, they're those arguments that have to be made. The economic arguments, you have to make the argument for sale of Western Power, the argument against the sale of Western Power. A lot of that detail goes over everybody's head, a lot of it goes over my head. But the issue is that, it's when it's all boiled down, that detail sort of goes into the background. It's whether people think, oh yeah, look, we'll give them another go, or you think, no, it's time to change. And that's what it'll come down to. That's what I think will decide it in the end.
Let's fast forward to the morning of the 12th of March, and there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. For both leaders, there's a lot at stake at this, isn't there, in terms of who wakes up either the victor or the conquered on that morning. Can we sort of, to both of you, how do you sort of see that period, the weeks, the days after March 11 sort of playing out within the parties?
Well, either way, there'll be leadership changes no matter who wins, I imagine, because if Mark McGowan doesn't win, I suspect that Labor would want to change leaders because it would be his second election loss. And if it goes the other way, there's likely to be a change as well. I think if Colin Barnett loses, I suspect the heir apparent, Lisa Harvey, the deputy, would be unlikely to become the opposition leader. I suspect it would be more likely the Prisons Minister, Joe Francis, or someone a bit sort of that's more likely to kick some heads in, I imagine.
I agree. As soon as the losing side will change their leader automatically, virtually straight away, whichever side that will be. Interesting point that Jess makes about the Liberals and Lisa Harvey. I remember going back to 2001. I think Richard Court got involved in some manoeuvrings regarding the Liberal leadership when he decided that after 8 years he was going to step down, and there was there were a few crashes and bashes along the way there before that was all sorted out. But if Lisa Harvey is not going to be the Liberal leader, should the Liberals go into opposition, then there might be a few bashes and crashes on the way again then. But, it's a great business, isn't it? It's a great business, and we'll have to wait and sort
the knives and the elbows might be well and truly out after March 11 then within the parties.
Well, some are already being sharpened.
Whichever side, David, it could be a similar story.
Now, the three of us could probably spend the rest of the afternoon in conversation dealing with that. I realise that each of you probably have jobs and other things to get onto, but I do want to finish to both of Peter and Jess with one question. I'll try and finish it on more of an uplifting and lighter note. So far in this campaign, is there a particular moment or an event that's probably made you smile or laugh out loud?
I had a bit of a think because I know you showed us a couple of these questions.
You weren't meant to say that. This is all on the fly.
Well, this one was hard though. This one was really hard. I thought about it for a long time, and I tell you what, it's actually been quite a dry campaign. But then I remembered I always like a bit of nakedness on an election campaign, and I remembered those protesters up the tree on some of the commercial outlets down at the bushland on Roll 8, and I thought, you know what, at least they're passionate. Not that I'm advocating breaking the law, but I did get a bit of a smile on my face seeing them, and the reason why they did it, obviously, was because they had to have two police officers come. A female officer had to come as well, obviously, to pull these naked women out of the trees, which I thought was just a very clever strategy, wasn't it, really? So, yeah, that did put a smile on my face, a rare smile in an election campaign. So
it's nudity for Jess. Yep. Peter?
David, when I was on the road before handing over to Jess, Colin Barnett went out to the WA Ballet Company out at Maylands to sort of announce that the government was injecting a whole lot of money into that lovely old building out there. And as we were leaving, I said to him, what's on the agenda tomorrow? And he said, back to resources, back to the comfort zone. And I thought, that makes sense. So the thing that stands out for me in this election campaign was earlier this week when the iron ore price hit something like $95 US a tonne, and Colin Barnett actually smiled. In fact, he was really smiling, and he said, I told you the resource industry was cyclical, I told you it would bounce back. Those people here, and especially Innes, not personal, he said, those people on the east, they didn't believe me, but it's happened. And he had this big beaming smile from the Premier. Not too many of those, but that was the day.
Wonderful. I know Paula and the CEDA team run a very tight ship in terms of timeliness, so I'd like to thank both Jessica and Peter. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And as I said, it's something I could happily let drag on for most of the afternoon. To both of you, I wish you the best for the campaign and all your coverage and commentary and analysis. And, we'll put in the free plug. Continue to watch, listen and read all Jessica's and Peter's work. And may the best man and party win on March 11. And I'll hand over to Paula to wrap up what I think's been a terrific EPO today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David.